What up, folks? Mikey G here, Midlife Crisis Podcast. Super excited to have you all. We already got some eyeballs in here. I'm loving it. So we have an amazing show tonight. I don't know why I want to call you the Resurrector. Every time I want to call you the
I get that a lot.
The
Oh man,
Resuscitator.
been called much worse.
The Resuscitator, aka Taylor, also known as Doc. Welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Super excited. This is my first live stream podcast. I've done Twitter Spaces for over a year now, all just voice, and so this is a new world for me. So go easy on me.
Dude, I will. I'm telling you, like I said, man, we're gonna build a friendship online. It is freaking magical. We had, do you know? So you've been around this space for a while, right? You remember Oni Force? I was actually an original Hate Piece mod. So around that time, that whole 2024, 2021 era, do you remember Oni Force? It's the original anime PFP, by the way.
Oh yeah,
not Azuki, right? So JR
Yeah.
Art Space, I had him on this past week. Same thing. He had never, well, I think he had done a podcast, but dude, unbelievable conversation. We're going to have a great one today. So before we get into all of the awesome conversation, little update here. Tomorrow, Maddie came down with, I don't know, a flu or something. So we're going to try some Diablo 4 live stream just to do a little AMA, hang out, ask questions. We'll be doing that around 3 p.m. PST. Friday, I usually have a plague space, and I do the same format, invite guests on. I got good old jury duty, so I can't plan anything in case I get called in. You know, I'm going to have to deal with that for the next week. Not too excited about that. Other guests we're working with, I don't know if you all have heard of Kermit. He's a great influencer. He works with Leon on the Unfungible marketing platform. We have another really interesting company coming on. They are basically applying Web3 to Zoom. And so you can also monetize your time by the minute if you want. So if you can think about that, that creates and opens up really interesting ways for whether you want to do a seminar or you want to charge for a half-hour fireside chat and, you know, have people ask you anything and monetize that. That's going to be a fascinating conversation. And then there's a lot of vacation coming up in August. So that's me in a nutshell. But let's get to the reason why we're here. And that is, I'm going to go with Doc. We're going Doc for the rest of the show because I'm going to call you the Resurrector if I go anything else. So Doc, what we like to do before we get into the famous midlife crisis question is a nice little formal intro. So a couple things about Doc. He's nicknamed Doc because he's actually a doctor. He's a critical care physician during the day, DGen by night. Dude got into Web3 around the CryptoKitty era. Doc, remind me, when was that? Was that in the 18s, 19s, 17s?
2017.
17s. That's what I thought. I knew it was like back in the day. So we're talking about Bitcoin. I mean, it was still expensive, but it wasn't what it is right now, right? What do you remember what Bitcoin
that was right after
it
peaked at around 20,000 after it had started at 2000. And that was kind of when I hopped off Bitcoin and started to explore Web3, the beginnings of Web3 at the time. And CryptoKitties was a lot of fun, but it went to zero. I lost all my money. And so I got a taste of the real Web3.
Did we all? I think I told you my story, right? I made like $40,000 in 2 weeks. Guess what happened? That's all gone.
Oh man, but it's fun.
Oh my God, it's so much fun, isn't it? And I think, you know, we'll talk about this, but the networking and the people, and it's been a wild ride, and I've loved every second of it. So
oh man, I was hooked.
Oh, so hooked, and we're still hooked. This is why we're here. I mean, guess what I didn't think I would be doing on a Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. with a 10-month-old, hopping on a podcast with a guy that I have talked to for maybe 20 minutes total, and we're about to have a multi-hour conversation. Well, I promise I won't keep you for 2 hours, but we're about to have a really long conversation because we have this passion about an amazing thing. So let's get back to your intro, though. DGen by night, found CryptoKitties around 2017. That's how he got into Web3. Uh, Obviously has founded a project called Ryders, which, and what I was telling Doc before this, super impressed with the amount of comments I've been getting on all the posts. You can tell that the community that you've built, man, is super passionate, and I'm really, really impressed by that. Because I've said this at nauseum. I call it Brand 3.0. I really do think the big innovation for me as a brand marketing guy is the how can you utilize community to build a really interesting company. So it seems like that you're doing that. In addition, trailblazers with the spaces with Westside Habibi. And I love that NFTs are thriving is the name of your show. Have you gotten a lot of slack for that lately? Because technically they are not thriving right now. Do you get that a lot?
Yeah, and usually we have to offer a disclaimer at the beginning of each show that we're not claiming that all NFTs are thriving. We're hosting projects that are thriving, that the founders, the community members, the art, the utility, it really is thriving. And some projects truly are great, and we highlight them throughout our show over the past year or so that we've been doing it. So that's the reason behind the name. We're not claiming that all NFTs are thriving.
Right, right. Well, it's a good angle, and I think I'm really happy we're having this conversation. I get to have conversations with people like yourself because that's my brand too, right? I want to bring people on, give you the stage, the platform to talk about yourself, and then people can make a decision: do they want to spend their hard-earned money with you or not? Because at the end of the day, we're investing in people, not projects, correct? And that's the angle that I'm taking. It seems like you're taking a similar angle with your space, making sure that you're covering the people that are actually trying to build something legitimate, because we've been through it all from the early 2020s. So that was a wild ride, man. So last thing, I asked him for just a little tidbit, maybe some things that people might not know a ton about Doc, and he gave me this little tidbit, and it's really interesting. Dude got a major in Germany. Sorry, Germany, in German in college, which I have not heard many people major in an actual language for college. Lived in Germany for a while. Can you just explain that to me? Like, why did you go down this like you just love Germany that much? You are German. Like, what was the thought process there?
Yeah, I don't know if I've told my community this or really folks at all in general in spaces, but yeah, I majored in German. I speak German, although I've lost a lot of it. Been to Germany multiple times and lived there for a few months. I just got really interested in it in high school. German history, language, culture, food, beer, everything, you name it.
Yeah.
And then I went on a foreign exchange program, and then I decided to
Mm,
major in it in
yeah.
college. Basically, German studies and medicine were my two passions at the time. So pre-med is not a major. It's not even a minor, really. It's like a
Right.
focus in studies. So you can't like major in pre-med. So you got to major in something else. And
Hey,
a lot of folks choose like biochemistry or chemistry or whatever. And I thought that was boring. So I majored in German, and I loved it. It was great.
I love it. Well, we'll get in a little deeper there too. But yes, anything else to add, or did I do you justice there, bro?
That was perfect.
All right, awesome. So, with that being said, the world famous midlife crisis question. And by the way, I told you I'd screw up this podcast. More than you, I've already screwed it up multiple times. Can't even talk correctly already. And we're just getting started. So don't worry about that. I'm going to screw it up a couple more times. All right, got my damn cord wrapped around my foot. So let's get back into it. The famous world midlife crisis question. World famous midlife crisis question. Again, that's what I meant to say. How'd you get the seat you're sitting in today? Please give me episode 1, 2, and 3. To reiterate for the audience or for people that have never watched this show, episode 1 is childhood influences, memories, people that helped mold the mindset that you have today. Episode 2, college, like we just talked about, your professional career. really interested in the frame of skill sets gained during that time that that you think help have applied to Web3 or helped you along your Web3 journey. And then episode 3 is your Web3 journey. We can start at the Crypto Kitty era, wherever you want to start, and then we'll go down that. Obviously, we'll talk about your project, we'll talk about the current space, and then we'll talk about what lies ahead in the future. So let's go with episode 1, man. Hit me. I cannot wait to hear it all.
All right, thanks, man. Thanks for the intro. I
Absolutely.
grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I love sports. I played 4 different sports every year. It helped like instill in me a competitive mindset and like a drive to compete and win. And when I realized that I couldn't go pro, and I switched to golf because I thought maybe I could make a career out of that, because I didn't have the body or the speed to be a defensive end in pro football. I switched to golf. I got pretty good at it, but not good enough. And then when I went to college, I didn't make the team at ASU, and so my competitive mindset switched to my other passion, which was science. In high school and even earlier than that, I loved science, learning about it all the time. And I wanted my career to be in science. I did some bench work, lab researching vitamin D and the breast cancer gene and their interactions in college, and I considered being like a lab scientist, but that in and of itself didn't strike a passion inside me. I wanted to basically use science as a tool, and I
Yeah.
realized that being a physician was basically taking science and using it to help people, which
I'm
I
going to
loved.
stop you right here, brother. Now,
Go ahead.
I'm going to interject. We're already talking about college and you being a doctor. Bro, you gave me I play sports, I like science, and now we're in college. We're gonna have to reel it back here a little bit. So let's go back to episode 1. I'm gonna dig into a couple of things. You already even gave me, believe it or not, lots of ammo to deal with. So starting with sports, what were the sports that you played? Were they all team? Were they individual? What were they?
Yeah, they started out all team. I started with soccer, then basketball, then baseball and football. So I played all of those sports year round. And then right at the end, like junior, senior year, I just switched it to golf only.
Oh, dude, I love golf. I went to the Phoenix Waste Management Open this past time where they said they're never gonna have the same thing. It was wild. It was
I was there
wild.
too.
Oh, were you?
Oh
Shit,
man. Oh
man.
man.
My bu
Huge fun.
my buddy, not my buddy, my brother-in-law works for Honeywell, and we had a suite on the 16th green. I was like 100 yards from the hole in the suite. It was mind-blowing. But back to the sports thing, because I think you always hear this, right? You always hear competitive, there's camaraderie aspect. Is there anything else that you think you brought from playing sports? And if not, that's totally fine. Totally fine if you can't think of anything else. But were there any other things that you feel like kind of affected the way that you thought or skill sets gained there? Anything?
Well, teamwork was a big aspect of it.
Right.
Learning how to be in a team and have like a team-oriented goal as opposed to
Hmm.
just personal goals.
Hmm.
And I think that's helped me in my Web3 journey as well.
Yeah, no, that's actually great insight. And so the science thing too, you mentioned that. So from is this like an early it science fairs? Was it you were just always fascinated by like you said, labs, experiment stuff? Where did that start?
I was actually anatomy class in high school. It came really, really easy to me, and I was
Uh-huh.
fascinated by the human body.
Right.
And all of my science classes I loved. And in college, organic chemistry, you basically go to a lab and you
Oh.
make molecules out of other molecules,
Mhm.
and it's really hard, but I loved it. And I wanted to be a chemist and just like design molecules. I was just so fascinated by
You're
it.
the only person that I have ever heard that come out of a mouth before.
It's
I
not a
went to
common Web3 thought that you hear
Yeah.
on Spaces.
I went to Penn State and I was pre-engineering, and the instant I had the organic chemistry showed up in my curriculum, I'm like, "See you later." and I ended up being a graphic designer. Like that was my total shift. But okay, so those are two good little tidbits. I'm looking for more. So let's talk about, are you open to talking about your family? Are you cool with that?
Sure. Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem.
so when it comes to your family or, whether it be grandparents, aunts, or uncles, like, were you in the typical suburbia household in Phoenix? Did you have entrepreneurship parents? Like, what are your thoughts there? Because to be a doctor and then to start your own NFT company in Web3, there's some traits that were kind of built there earlier on. So I'm kind of interested in that and just reflecting back. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a great point. My father was an entrepreneur and he was really successful when I was in high school. And I didn't want to do what he was doing, which was in the video business. I mean, I like
Mhm.
TVs and video games, but not to that extent where I would want to sell like inverter panels and stuff.
Right,
But he was successful, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps and do something on my own that ended up being successful as well. So I
right.
think maybe the Rough Riders, like me and West Side of BB starting this, maybe that had a little bit of an origin story to it.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. And so that's how we start peeling back the layers of the onion, right? And a lot of times we see these common themes. As far as that, right? Watching your dad, obviously being an entrepreneur, getting that bug. Were there like memories of being at his business, helping him out? Like, were there kind of some insights looking back that you thought you might gained, or what a typical, my dad was a mailman and my mom stayed at home. I wasn't getting intimate knowledge to like an entrepreneurship parent growing up. What did that look like? Any thoughts there?
I certainly saw how he worked, and he was working until like 10 or 11 p.m. almost every night.
Right.
He was a grinder, and I realized that grinding like that was the way to be successful in whatever field. And
Hmm.
then throughout my journey, I basically had to do the same thing. Now that I'm an attending physician, I can relax a little bit and focus on the more fun side. But
Right.
before that, I was just grinding in the medical world.
Right. Yeah, and there's that aspect, and I'm not interested in this because this comes up a lot. This theme of grinding, right? And I have had I don't know if you remember Phantom Network and, Antonym, like they were super hype projects at the time. Dex being one of the person I reference a lot of time. He talked about how he was working 20-hour days for almost a year and ended up collapsing in his apartment, right? And you always hear this narrative online that I need to grind more, and if you don't grind, you can't be successful. You obviously have been impacted by that grind mentality. But is there a point in your mind where it's like, at some point it's gotta stop because it's not sustainable? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I guess we're skipping ahead a little bit, but
Yeah,
when you're
I
in med
mean, I
school,
if
you
there's a detour, I gotta take it because this is a really interesting topic, right? So we'll kinda navigate and go through it.
when you're in medical school, virtually every day you have to study until 11 p.m. And then wake up and do the whole thing over again. And I learned that I had to do that really early on in med school, and it doesn't stop from there. So you go into residency. I was in residency for 3 years. You're just working 80 hours a week or even more, and then you got to study on top of that because you got to take board exams almost every year. And then at the same time, you have to do research and publish studies in the medical journals to get into fellowship, which is what I got into to specialize into critical care medicine. And
Right,
then in fellowship, I was working even more than 80 hours a week and studying on top of that. And
right,
so when I got out, and now I'm a board certified critical care physician, I only work 40 hours a week. Um, I was left with all this time on my hands, and
right,
I didn't know
right,
what to do with it.
right,
And segueing into Web3 a little bit, but a lot of folks tell me all the time, they're like, how are you able to manage Rough Riders and you have toddlers and you're a physician? And I think that probably explains it. That I'm just used to having to be so efficient to
right.
make it through this career path.
Yeah, and that makes and you actually said something really interesting there, the word efficient, right? And so I still think I understand you did grind. I'm still interested though in is there a finite amount of time that you can do that grind? Or is it an indefinite process to you and it's indefinite because you put things in place to allow it to be a long period of time? You understand what I'm asking?
But I think what helped me was being formally educated on what burnout is, and you may hear that term
Oh,
a lot.
this is fascinating. I've never heard somebody formally educated about burnout. Hit me, man. I want to hear this.
All right. Well, hopefully I do it justice, but you may have heard the term a lot. You get burnt out doing something too much, whatever.
Right.
But it doesn't just affect, I mean, it affects your whole body, not just your mental
Hmm.
health, but your physical health. And you have to understand the signs and realize that it's not your fault, that it's nobody's fault. But the ways to relieve burnout is to basically rein it in a little bit.
Right.
Um, and limit the time that you're whatever it is that's burning you out, limit your
Right.
time there and reignite your passion. And when you feel that you're passionate, your passion is leading you in the field that you're in, or whatever you once had passion for.
Right.
um, It'll manifest itself in depression, anxiety, health problems, like physical health problems like
Yeah.
reflux or
Yeah.
sleep apnea,
Yeah.
um, gaining weight, and then compounding medical problems on top of that. And so it's really important to recognize burnout, and not. A lot of folks, at least historically, would blame the person who was burnt out as though it was their fault. But in
Right.
reality, it's what's around them, and
Hmm.
recognizing that, and then backing off and balancing your life and doing what you love, is really important. So I've been burnt out a ton of times throughout my career, whether it was medical or in my life, and even probably around mint time for Rough Riders, I got burnt out,
Yeah.
because I was just working just constantly,
Yeah.
and I loved it at the time, but I realized that it was starting to affect my mental health a little bit. So I backed off a little bit, and I just focused on the things that I loved, which was building utility for it. And then I realized that I was just as passionate about it as I ever was, and then I learned to balance it a little bit more, and focus on my life, and and that helped it become sustainable.
Ah, this is such a great conversation. I'm so excited already. So is this just self research? Is this something that's taught in med school, like the actual term burnout and how it can affect physical health? Like where did you kind of start really researching and learning this knowledge?
I first heard about it in med school, but I wasn't formally educated on it until residency, and also again in fellowship. Um, and you realize that it's a clinical medical phenomenon. It's not just being weak-willed or whatever some folks want to say.
Interesting. Yes.
But it's similar to depression, in the
Hmm.
way that it can affect your whole
Hmm.
daily routine.
Right. And so just make dude, we're gonna have to have like a one-off burnout. So have you had burnout spaces just talking about this? Because this is fascinating. Oh, bro, we're gonna
No,
have to absolutely have a burnout space. This is great. Uh,
I
so
didn't know folks would be interested in it.
hey, listen, man, this is our podcast. If they want to be interested in it or not, I'm gonna listen. We are cutting this together because people need to hear these messages. Like, this is really why I do what I do. I genuinely, and you'll get this throughout the. I love doing this. You want to talk about passion, right? That allows me, to your point. It's such a good conversation. There are so many times, 10 minutes before the podcast, I'm like, motherfucker, I am tired. I do not want to do this. But for me, which gets me through the burnout is that just the passion, the excitement I get. And damned, sure enough, once it goes live and I hear my voice in the microphone, I'm like, God, I love this. This is fantastic. And every time I get to talk to somebody like you that has a whole nother wealth of knowledge that I don't have in my head, I'm going to school right now, man. It's awesome. So I think this
Thanks,
is
man.
a dude, this is amazing. So I think this is really, really a topic that people cannot hear enough about in Web3. So the last thing is, and we'll actually get back to the rest of the episode 1 and 2, and we're absolutely having a space on this in the future. But signs of burnout. I think that's a great way to kind of close this little detour that we took. Does that manifest differently per person? Are there common signs that you should look out for? Because I think that would be helpful for people to hear.
I think not wanting to get up and do the thing you once loved to do, whether it's your job or your hobbies, uh, losing that interest, feeling anxious, not wanting to even participate in your other aspects of life, like going to dinner with your family or your friends.
Right.
Um, and I mean, it can affect everything,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
just your work.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And that, I think what gets hard is how do you differentiate burnout anxiety compared to just life anxiety. But at the same time, if you're experiencing burnout, it's probably pretty evident or clear to their outside parties like, hey, man, you need to maybe take a step back because I barely ever see you and you're just grinding 24/7. So, how critical do you think it is to have that outside party looking in as well? Because to me, like talking about this in real time, I think I told you, I don't even know if I told you in our kind of intro call, I went through a major depressive order, man, and it was fucking brutal. I was second to second, right? And that I will still say to this day, well, there's 2 things, modern medicine, but the number one thing was my wife, who was my guardian angel, but the support network I had, because they, as much as I didn't wanna hear it, they were able to have a normal head and say, "Hey, this is not right." So I think that's critical in this scenario too. What are your thoughts there?
There are burnout surveys on the internet. So for any listeners that might be feeling that they're burnt out, I would Google burnout surveys,
Mm,
and then you'll go through their questions, and you'd be like, "Oh man, I am burnt out. This is all me." Um, and the reason that it's so important for me to recognize it and treat it before it reaches a tipping point is because for physicians, it'll reduce their quality of work
yeah.
and impact patient outcomes. So it's really important for physicians not to get burnt out and stop it in its tracks before it reaches the tipping point of impacting patient care.
Right. Man, I'm gonna have to actually link you up with my sister too, because she's got her PhD in nursing. She's a clinical nurse specialist and she is really passionate about burnout. She's done a bunch of studies. She's spoken at Mayo Clinic multiple times, and she did a lot of studies with COVID and burnout in nursing and just like the drastic, like horrible impact COVID had, right? Um, Fascinating topic. So thank you for going down that detour to me. We're absolutely going to talk about that more in the future. Let's go back to the childhood before we get into, and we kind of touched a little bit on the medical stuff, but childhood, um, awesome conversation about your dad. Uh, what about, because talking to you and your demeanor, um, I can tell you're also obviously hard worker, but you're also a little even keeled, right? So is there anything from either siblings or your mom, like other personality traits that you think you kind of acquired or experiences that stood out that isn't so much the entrepreneurship? I'm a grinder. Is there anything else there?
When I was a kid, I was actually more emotionally labile than I am now. I think when you do something like critical care medicine, it hardens you
Mm,
in certain ways, and
yeah.
it made it for me to where I'm able to handle like critical situations.
Yeah.
As you do it repeatedly,
Yeah.
you maintain you lose like the emotional lability, and you have to.
Mm,
in the
Right.
situations that I'm exposed to. So,
Right.
and then that
Right.
impacted the rest of my life. When something goes wrong in general, I don't overreact to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just come up with a plan to fix it, and and I think that's helped me, and not just in medicine, but in IRL, as we say in the degen world.
IRL. Okay, yeah, no, that's fascinating insight too. So let's do this. If there if there's I think we did a good job at episode one. Let's kind of go back. You were getting there, right? You're like loving science. You were obsessed about I think it was vitamin D and breast cancer. You were doing some lab experience research there, and then you're getting into pre-med. You had to major in something. You freaking love Germany, and so you majored in German. So let's kind of pick up there and get into this episode too.
Episode 2 is how I became a doctor.
College, pre-med, your actual career. And we've
Okay.
touched on a couple things, right? About talking about burnout, um, talking about how you've had to desensitize a little bit, which has helped you out in your personal life. We can go a little bit deeper in that. But as you take us through this story in episode 2, which is college, pre-med, and your actual like day career, context and mentors, leaders, skill sets gained, like you talked about, maybe the having to desensitize a little bit that helped you and like prepped you for Web3 or skill sets that have helped you everyday life. Because a part of this is really the main part of this conversation, I think, is to you. You just said it, right? Oh, I didn't think burnout would be a interesting thing people would care about. Absolutely, it's fascinating, and people need to hear that, right? So we'll just keep on going down that path, and when I hear something interesting, I'll stop you, and we can dive a little deeper.
Okay, so as a preamble to my Web3 journey, I was really into Pokemon trading cards when I was
Oh,
in.
dude, I can't tell you how many people that have been on this show that these are the 2 thing, Pokemon and RuneScape. I cannot
Oh
tell
man, I
you.
loved RuneScape too.
Dude, the amount of times RuneScape and Pokemon come up in Web3, dude, if someone could just replicate RuneScape with a blockchain twist and like actually make it like RuneScape, they'd be a bajillionaire because that's
Oh
all
man,
people talk about.
definitely. Yeah. So that once I got into the NFT world, I was like, oh, this is like Pokemon, except it's on chain and I can make money off of it easier.
Right.
But so going back to college, I went to Arizona State with a pre-med focus, and I had to participate in research and volunteer at a hospital in order to like pad my resume to get into med school. Also, you have to have virtually like a 4.0 GPA and
Right.
get at least 80 percentile on the MCAT in order to get in. So that was my focus and my primary drive. But Arizona State is also a party school, and we went to keggers all the time. It was
Oh,
five
yeah.
dollars to get in. I frequently didn't have $5, so I would find ways to get into the party without that. But that's neither here nor there. So I was volunteering in a hospital, and I was actually in the ICU, and I was kind of like overwhelmed by what I saw, and I was like,
Mhm.
actually, I was regretting it. I was like, am I really cut out to be a doctor? Because I can't handle this right now.
Ooh.
I was like, maybe I'll just be a primary care doc when I get through, and that won't be as traumatic, so I'll be able to handle that. But I seriously had worries that I chose the wrong career, which is funny because in the end, I became a critical care doc, which was and I was scared to death of the ICU when I first saw it. So any folks that have a similar worry, your feelings and emotions are gonna change when it comes to healthcare. So if it's your passion, just persist along the path
Mm.
and um, don't be thrown away by some of those things. So
So question real quick
um,
though there though, is this something that again is a like, for instance, I don't think I could ever be a doctor because of like if I see blood, I just get queasy, right? And that's been kind of like I even think about it and I'm like, listen, It's not a big deal. It's just blood. I have like a physical reaction to it. So I was like, I could never be a doctor. My question is, like you said, when you first saw this stuff and you were going through it, you're like, I don't think this is crazy. Was that just persistency of getting through it and thinking to yourself, "Oh, I'll get through it," um, or was just kind of normalized over time? I'm interested in that process.
It was definitely normalized over time,
Right.
but I knew that underlying it, that the reason I wanted to get into it was because I wanted to help people, and I wanted to do it in a scientific manner, and those were the fundamental building blocks towards me becoming a physician, and there were ways of being a physician that wouldn't, um, you know, overwhelm me, and so that's why I persisted. But in the end, I became a critical care doc because those really tense moments,
Mhm.
are what make me focus harder than I would normally. So, like when I'm in a primary care clinic, and somebody has a blood pressure of 130 over 80, and it should be 120 over 80, even though
Right.
that really won't impact them long term at all. So it's basically a non-problem. I had a hard time like walking the patient through it and focusing on that, when it isn't really an issue. But when
Right.
somebody is actively dying right in front of me, I would focus like 110% more than I ever could in an outpatient setting, and that was when I was at my best. And
Right.
then that's when I realized that critical care was right for me.
Right. Right. Okay, so take me back to what you're just finding out critical care is right for you. Let's keep on progressing through this. Unless there's
We were in
anything
college.
through Oh yeah, yeah. Unless there's anything in the beginning of college, because you were saying like, listen, I'm trying to balance keggers. I don't have any money. Like, how are you balancing keggers and even studying? Like at that point, was it? I guess youth has something to do with that, right? Because you're able to.
Yeah,
I look back when I was 20, and I'm like,
couldn't
damn,
do that
man,
now.
I could conquer the world. I'm 42 now, and I feel like I'm already falling apart. God, I don't even know what 60 is gonna be. But is that just
Yeah.
a product of youth? You're kind of all hopped up on adrenaline doing the college thing?
Well, college was really easy, for me, and it became like this massive like shift when I got into medical school, because medical school is like 100 times harder than
Right,
undergraduate school,
right.
and it hit me like a ton of bricks,
Mhm,
because college came so easy for me.
mhm.
Med school was not like that, and so I had to find a way really quickly to change my studying habits and work ethic to make it through.
So talk to me about that. That's interesting to me because I think a lot of people hit these kind of forks in the road in life, right? And you're like, listen, if I don't hack it, like my dream is kind of gone. So again, in this situation, I'm assuming there's a little bit of adrenaline because you don't want to lose everything that you've dreamed of and worked for. But I'm also interested in what changed. Like, what did you start doing? Was it being regimented about a schedule? Was it getting better sleep? Like, what are those habits that you started picking up to say, shit, man, I got to change this quickly because I don't want to fail and I want to keep on going?
Well, I had to sacrifice what I did in my free time, and only study medicine, and that was hard to give up at first, um, because before that I didn't have to, and then in
Right,
med school you do, and
right.
if I wanted to pass and make it through, it was 100% focus on medicine and just studying, and going to class and all the other stuff. Um, and that was a harsh reality, but I overcame it and made it through, and that helped prepare me for the rest of the career because it doesn't get easier after med school.
Right. And I think that is again, it's I feel like and I'm interested in your response to this. Again, another narrative that you hear a lot. To be successful, you must make sacrifice. And sacrifice in the um Gary Vee talks about this a lot, right? I didn't go to parties. I didn't drink in my, late 20s, early 30s. I worked and that's all I did. Do you think people can be balanced and achieve their goals? Or is it a product of how intense those goals are? So I'm thinking more of like med school, or being not to take med school around because we know that's tough. Really, entrepreneur, right? Can I be an entrepreneur, have balance, and basically have my cake and eat it too? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I'd say, I mean, the odds are against you if
Hmm.
you take that approach. You can get really lucky, like you can invent the fidget spinner or something that ends up going viral, and
Yeah.
then just kind of rest on your laurels. But I'm sure the
Right.
fidget spinner inventor had to put in a ton of work at the beginning.
Hmm.
But my outlook on it was that I know that I have to sacrifice a ton, and a lot of my friends back home are they have their careers and they can relax. But it, at beginning it looks like an insurmountable achievement to overcome basically 14 years of education to be a physician. But
Right.
looking back on it, it was a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
It went by so quickly,
Right.
and I actually had fun doing it, especially in residency and fellowship. I had fun learning, but also just meeting the people around me. It's like a tight community, just like
Yeah.
some of these NFT projects.
Yeah.
Um, Being through trials and tribulations with a small group together and growing together
Yep.
ends up being a lot of fun. And while you're doing it, you're helping people. And so a lot of people are like, well, 14 years of education to get to where you are, that's too much.
Right.
But it's not about the destination, it's about the journey too.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
journey was a ton of fun. I met my wife in college. We got married. We traveled a little bit during residency and fellowship.
Hmm.
So it wasn't all bad. We had a great time, and I learned a ton and met a bunch of great people, and now I'm done and I get to do fun things like be an NFT project founder.
Right. No, I love that, man. And so there's a couple things you said that are interesting. How I interpreted what you were said, and this is the one thing that he's an example of like. So I actually played tennis at Penn State my freshman year, so I had that sense of team and this basically camaraderie. Right, you're going through these miserable times with a small group of people in med school, and you build these bonds that are really different than you can get. I use my buddy as a fireman, right? And like they're in that firehouse on the long shifts 24/7. And you're starting to build these relationships that are just, it's not your typical friendship, right? So I'm assuming that's what you were getting at when you were saying like these times of just building that with the people, right? Is that kind of what
Yeah,
you were getting at?
so a lot of folks like they'll go to college, and when you're in college, you have that tight community and like you're
Right.
in a walkable setting, and it's like a totally different feel for the rest of your life. And then you get out and you move to the suburbs and you have kids, and then it's like hard to make friends. Like there's apps for friends, just like on Twitter, trying to make friends, and people have a hard time. And then they look back on college and high school and realize that they loved, even though it was hard and you had
Yeah.
to study and you had to work and you had to do all this stuff, but you were in a tight community in like a walkable setting around each other all the time. And that's where lasting bonds are formed that you'll have for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Once you get out and you're in suburbia just working a 9 to 5 job, it's a lot harder.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that that's really interesting because I think that is another sense of why, whether you want to call it camaraderie or whatever, why Web3 is so attractive to people, because you can find your group. You obviously have through Rough Riders and creating the space. And I think one of the more fascinating things is not only do you find your people, but a lot of times for me, it's like it's people I never thought would be kind of my friends, right? Because when you're just going out into the world, it there's no surprise you tend to hang out with people that think like you, even look like you, right? But when you have a profile picture, now more people are docs now, but I think it's more the fact that you are forcing yourself into an ecosystem where you're talking to people all over the world. It really does open up your horizons and your perspective there. Do you feel like you've gained that similar experience with Rough Riders community?
Yeah, for sure. When I first got into Web3 and I found the Bulls and Apes project,
Yeah,
I got into their community, and that was when I first got on Spaces and first talked on Spaces, and I was super nervous to do
right.
it, but it was with a group of people that I had already known for a while, and I had heard them speak, and I talked to them, especially our trait group called the Alpha Bulls.
Yeah,
And that's when I learned the real sense of community that you can get out of NFTs. And
yeah,
it's really hard to explain to a layman that may not know anything about NFTs. It's not just an image that you can right click save, but it's a community that's hard to replicate in the real world.
mhm,
But at the NFT projects that are great do that. And that was one of our focuses in Rough Riders, to ensure that we fostered a great sense of community, and that was our priority. And I'm hopeful that we've been able to do that. I know that our community has been super supportive of the project, and yeah, it's been incredible to see all of their support for something that me and Westside of BV created. Um, and there's a lot of community members that stepped up and helped us on the team as well. Um,
right.
but the essence of NFTs, beyond the art and the utility and whatnot, is community. And
Yeah,
it's really maximized in NFTs as opposed to tokens, as opposed to DeFi projects and things like that. The ability to like coalesce around collecting and appreciating the art and the community in and of itself is really maximized inside the NFT world.
yeah. No, it's what fascinated me. I went down the community management route, and that whole hate beast situation was just when I went through that, I was like, this is just wild. Like, I've never seen anything like this before. And that's when I really, really got hooked. And then pivoted my then video game stream to what we're doing now, which has been an amazing, magical ride. So, going back into you have a fascinating Web3 journey too, and I think you're going to have a lot of great insight there. But I don't want to lose sight of this. So you're going through residency, you're building these really tight knit relationships. You basically just bit the bullet, right? You're like, hey, I got to leave everything behind because I just got to grind, right? And so you end up obviously graduating, getting through med school. Anything else in that time period that sticks out to you other than the camaraderie, figuring out how to grind? Anything else there that you take away and you're like, man, I really learned X and it has helped me out?
Not other than actual medical stuff,
Yeah,
which we can also
totally,
talk about.
totally fine. I did have one question that I'm very interested in. College comes up a lot on this show because everyone I talk to is a founder and an entrepreneur, and there's this very interesting. Obviously, most founders are like, "Oh, college is BS." Um, you know, you learn through doing, but they always say, except for if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer. 14 years sounds incredibly long. I'm really interested. Is that really what it takes? Do you think there could be improvements to the system how it is? What are your thoughts there?
That's a good question. In other countries, and actually in parts of Texas as well, they do a hybrid system where you do 6 years. The first 2 years are college, and then after that it's med school, and it's like a combined program.
Yeah,
And those folks end up coming out just as well educated as our system, I think. So it could be cut down a little bit on the college side,
right.
but the med school side, residency and fellowship, no, I don't think that they could cut that down at all.
Yeah, and I totally agree, but and that would we go back to like there's just something said about applied learning, right? You're not going to be able to learn from reading a book. Obviously, you need to know what you're talking about, but going through that practical reality and application is huge. I was just interested in that question. I was interested in your side. And that 6-year program, that sounds like maybe a more interesting solution, because 14 years is a hell of a long time, dog. Like, that is a
Yeah.
long time.
Well, it's
Um,
6 years for just med school and college, and then they do have to do residency and fellowship if they choose after that. So it's
right,
still 9 years minimum,
right.
but it cuts out 2 years essentially.
That's
But you're
awesome.
right. I mean, when you get out in the clinical world, you need repetition. You need to see just hundreds and hundreds and thousands of patients
Yep,
to be able to be an effective and efficient clinician, because
yep,
it's all about pattern recognition.
yep,
Like if you have a 70-year-old smoker patient that comes in with excruciating abdominal pain and a lactic acid of 10 with a blood pressure of 90/50, and on 20 mics of Levophed, you know instantly that that's acute mesenteric ischemia and dead gut. But if you're a resident, you may be looking at that like, oh, maybe this is pneumonia. But once you go through it and you see the same thing over and over again, you don't have to think twice, and you call the surgeon immediately and get them to the operating room.
dude.
But if you don't see that repeatedly, you're not going to be able to manage patients well.
Right. And I would have easily said it was acute mascara and dead bud. I think that's what you said, right? I was kind of
Acute
close.
mesenteric ischemia and dead gut.
Dead butt and mascara. That's what I heard. uh, it's funny that you drop that, because my sister, she calls up all the time and she's like, I had a day, and she rips that shit off, and I'm like, Jack, like, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, I'm not your colleague. Like, you need to dumb this down big time, because I just heard mascara and dead butt. All right. No, but that is a great example. And I could tell, because you just rattled that off like it was second nature. And that's, when you're in intense situations like you are, the only way you're gonna get there is by repetition. Same thing with, I said this story maybe the last time or the podcast before. I still have a corporate job as well. I've been in design brand for a majority of my life, but I have, it's not my favorite job ever, but it's like high level business strategy, and it's just a lot of BS, to be honest. But I have to give a lot of presentations. And the last one I gave to the VP was like, excellent job. And someone hit me up after, and they're like, how did you get so good at speaking? And I said, well, I got really good advice for you. Start a podcast and do that for 5 years, and then get back to me. And it's the same thing, I just don't, there's really nothing that you can do. The age old 10,000 hours or whatever the guy wrote the book on, just have to do it, dude. And that's
Yeah.
such a critical thing for anybody in Web3. People always say, I don't have the skill set, or I don't think the way, someone like X, Y, and Z, and they're successful, never be them. And it's like, no, you don't know, because you just need to do it. I mean, Nike by far has the best slogan ever crafted by a company: just do it. Like, it's just
Mhm.
simple. Like, that is a lot of skill when you're talking about success when it comes to business and even personal growth too, right? That is what it boils down to in my mind. But it's hard, We wanna, you're the doctor guy. Like, our brains want to keep us safe. We don't want to take risks. We don't want to do all that stuff. But it's great to hear you say that, and it's good to know that we're in good hands with you, because you just ripped that shit off. Actually, next time I need to go to the ER or anything, I'm gonna ask them to fly me out to Phoenix, because you just ripped that off, no problem. So no,
Hey,
no,
thanks,
awesome
man.
insight, man. Awesome insight. So let's go um past. And so, what is the time period between you becoming a doctor and finding Web3? Is that a large gap? Is it a small gap?
Probably right after I graduated fellowship, and I had all this time on my hands, I started to dive deeper into Web3. So a few
Okay.
years before that, I dabbled with CryptoKitties, and I always held Bitcoin and Ethereum, but I never really got into like on the blockchain until after fellowship, which
Okay.
was 3 years ago now.
Okay.
And I got into the DeFi world. One of the DeFi projects that I was interested in launched an NFT, and I was really interested in that because of like my Pokemon history,
Nice.
um, and I loved it. And then I moved. That was on the Kronos blockchain, and then I moved over to ETH and found the Bulls and Apes project, where I realized what a real community was about,
Right.
and the real utilities that you can have behind an NFT. I actually created my own trait group called the Ganga Tribe, which was an ape with wearing shaman clothing.
Nice.
And we formed a group around it, and we even had merch, and we had a bunch of content and animations and spaces, and
Was that the
we had a
first
great
ape
time.
group?
That was the first ape out of the Bulls and Apes project trait group. But
Love it.
there were plenty of trait groups within the Bulls collection,
Right.
which I was also a part of. But I was just hooked as soon as I got into that community. I was like, oh man, I'm addicted to this, and
Yeah.
I'm addicted to collecting and buying grails and showing it on Twitter and just having a great time. So I was hooked. And when I helped to build that trade group, I realized that even though I don't have any developer skills, that I can just using my experience in Web3 now that it had been like 2 years in Web3 and the connections that I had made, I can build something even though I'm not a developer, even though I'm a doctor and I don't have like developer skills,
Right. Right.
by creating utility and content and fostering community. And that kind of planted the seed in my head for potentially um, building an NFT project myself. But that was at the time where I met West Side of BB on one of the spaces that I was on.
Yeah.
He you might know him. He had a Killer Bear PFP at the time, big Twitter account. We just kind of connected as soon as we were on spaces, and we were talking on the phone a bunch, and we started hosting projects like big projects like Pudgy Penguins,
Uh-huh.
World of Women, some great projects on our spaces, just kind of learning what they're about, and so that our community could hear from these projects. And
Yeah.
it's something else when you're on a space and you hear from the founder and you hear their voice
Yeah.
and hear what they're building and the passion behind what they're doing. It's a lot different than like reading a Discord announcement or reading a Twitter post or the website. And and so I loved it. I just loved Twitter Spaces. I loved hosting them, speaking in them, being in them. And what's funny is that I hated public speaking before that. And a lot of people tell me that they don't want to come up and speak because
Yep.
they're scared and they're worried about public speaking, but they want to. So
Mhm.
I tell them that I hate it. I was scared, and I was even shaking the first time I hosted a space, even though I'm a critical care doc, and that's like a totally different world. But on a
Yeah.
space where many people are listening to you, I was just like trembling and sweating bullets. But
Yeah.
then when I
That
was done with it, I was like, actually, I love that.
yeah, it's crazy how it works. And again, I say this a lot. What's cool about all of what you just said is you can give people the strength to do that, to test it out, and your story is going to resonate different than my story and West Side story. And so, us sharing these stories and giving people the confidence to get outside their comfort zone, that's the coolest thing. You know, ultimately, why I do this, I've had hundreds of messages over time saying, like, thank you for having conversations with, I know we're already getting chat. There's hundreds of people watching us right now, and there's already been comments of saying, "This conversation is incredible. Thank you for having it." And I've had people say, you know, your conversation helped me get through some like really hard times, and that shit's meaningful, man. Like that's what we're really here at the end of the day. You're fixing people during the day, right? But
Hmm.
even what's interesting to me is that your full-time job is to basically save lives, right? but you still get meaning and purpose out of the Web3 because of these new skill sets and things gained. Did you ever think about it in that angle? Because I think that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think what we wanted to do in the Rough Riders project was to help others grow, not just like from all of the utilities that we offer, but personally too. If they want to grow their Twitter accounts and make a career out of that, we try to maximize that through tools in our Discord and um, seminars, helping them grow their Twitter account. And I
Right.
think like lasting utilities like that could really help somebody long term
Mhm.
are some of the most important utilities that an NFT project can offer.
That's how
And I think
absolutely.
and being on
Absolutely.
spaces is a big catalyst for that.
Right, right. Okay, so we kinda jumped forward to your project, which is great. Only the only thing, else because you covered, the spaces, the community aspect, linking up with West Side. Before that, in the initial, like, this crypto kitty phase, before you realize, like, "Oh, I wanna collect grails, I like the collection side of things." Was there anything else there in Web3 crypto that, like, really piqued your interest? Because a lot of people let's, let's be honest, most people come in here to try to become millionaires overnight, and then they quickly realized, oh shit, this is a lot of fake news on Twitter, and that this is not easy to become a millionaire overnight unless you're okay selling a little bit of your soul and just effing people over. Uh, was money first your driver, or you were just fascinated by the technology? What was that?
At first, it was financial
Yeah.
because in the DeFi world, and that was in DeFi summer, where I mean, remember one protocol I got in, they were promising 69,000% APR. And I was like, this is worth a shot. So I put it like a couple $100 in it. And I was like, look at it, it's going up like every minute. Why are people investing in the stock market where it goes up like 8% a year when you could put it in this thing and it goes up 69,000%?
Right.
But obviously that was all just their own Ponzi schemes and they went to zero, but I didn't know that at the time. Um, and then when I got into the NFT world, I realized that there's a lot more to it. Like the digital
Right.
membership aspect of it really isn't in the DeFi world.
Mhm.
Like you buy an NFT, it's basically a key to a digital club, and the founders can maximize the utilities for that membership club.
Right.
And it could be anything where you get free tickets to like a concert, or
Mhm.
you get access to investing in venture capital deals at a reduced carry, which is one
Right.
of my favorite utilities that I've had. Um, but the sky is the limit with what you can do with the digital membership um, aspect of what an NFT can do.
Absolutely. So, makes sense. Now we're into the project, but before we, go even deeper in the project, I think I have a couple questions and thoughts here. So first, you're starting to do spaces. Um, how do you even start phone conversations with West Side, right? I'm assuming was your following not that big, or did you just link up in spaces and hit it off? Like, what did that look like? Just like that friendship kind of growing.
Yeah, we were first in a space together, and then we were just kind of chatting in the DMs, and we were like, why don't we do a space every week where we host founders of projects and talk about how great they're doing? Because at the time we were really frustrated with the majority of spaces at the time were just complaining about rugs and scams and
Yeah,
just bickering at each other, and there was a ton of negativity, and there still is. But
got it.
we wanted to kind of change that narrative and actually highlight the good in Web3 and NFTs, and so that's why we call it NFTs are thriving. And we were super excited to build this thing, even though it wasn't a project or a mint or anything like that. It was just our
Yeah,
weekly Twitter space, and it grew and grew, and we enjoyed basically every minute of it. And so we were always talking, trying to see who we could get on the next show and what we were going to talk about and what
Hmm.
kind of angles we were or questions we were going to ask and features of the show and things like that, and creating content for the show. And we had a great time just kind of connecting over that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm so glad. I had heard a lot about I've heard a lot about the Rough Riders. Just to like, do you have not even association, but I feel like a lot of plague people are Rough Rider people too. I don't even know if you could use Frog to mint Rough Riders. There was some type of link there. So I
Yeah, there
I
was.
I heard a lot about you that way, but I had never heard about. I think I had seen West Side's name. I had not heard about. I didn't even realize that you were the other co-founder. But you're literally your NFT space is an angle that I do with my podcast. I do it a little bit different because I'm centering deep on the person. But I can't wait to start linking up there because I think we can share a lot of connections. I have a lot of people that would probably be great fit for your space and vice versa, right? Um,
Oh yeah, it
but
sounds great.
but before we go into my next natural question is, when do you have the light bulb moment that you want to do Rough Riders? But before we get there, you've been in this space for a while. We know NFTs are struggling. We've got this horrific meme coin shit phase that I don't even know what to call it. It's just bad. Um, uh, Somebody that is just still bullish on Web3, they want to create something. What is your advice to this person? What do you say, being a founder, knowing what you know now? Don't do X, spend your time here. What would that be? It could be anything. I'm interested to hear kind of your lessons learned or what you would say to somebody.
It's a lot harder than you would ever expect, and it's going to take way more work than you can ever imagine.
Hmm.
But if you grind, it'll be worth it in the end. Make sure that you have a great team around you. You can't do everything alone. Um, you're going to need a lot of help, and don't be afraid to ask for it.
Yeah. No, I love it. Those are all great tips. As far as um, the positions or the resources that you needed that you thought were hardest to get, is that community managers? Is that dev? Is it marketing? What does that look like to you?
It's probably standing within the Web3 space. So the benefit that we had of hosting this space for a while was that I got to know a lot of founders, a lot of folks in Web3, and so me and Westside of BB kind of became known a little bit,
Uh-huh.
and we developed relationships that we could leverage to help us grow.
Yes.
Like for example, our partner projects, we partnered with Space Riders, Supreme Kong, The Plague, um,
That's why I know you.
and the Bulls and Apes project. Yeah, because we had hosted them on our space,
Right.
and so I got to know the founders personally, and then we partnered with them before the mint to use their tokens in our mint, like you alluded to, the
Hmm.
FRG token.
Hmm.
What's funny is that the way that I got Pawns to endorse Rough Riders from the Plague standpoint was I posted a tweet that we were going to mint with FRG and I was going to burn it all because he loves burning FRG tokens.
Right.
And I got a DM from his team right after I wrote that tweet, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And they were
That's
like, "Yeah, for sure,
fantastic.
mint with FRG and then burn it."
Yeah.
So we had a great time with that.
Yeah.
But
And,
yeah,
and
we have a lot of plate holders in our ecosystem because of that.
and I think that's another thing that, people watch this or listening is um you just never know where those connections are coming from. And you just on a whim wrote a tweet, thought it was kind of funny, and then you got somebody to reach out to you, right? I have just had the most random. Well, I just told you, JR Art Space, the guy was Oni, right? Now I'm part of his District 111. He's got a really cool concept for a project. I'm one of the 111 people that are first into his project. That all just spawned from him tweeting, "Hey, what are like top tier podcasts in the space? Are there even any?" And then fortunately, I had a following through Plague and other people, and they tagged me, and literally it was in my DMs in 2 seconds. Like, but that comes from, like you said, takes a lot of work hard. You don't know where these connections are going to come from, but also building those relationships because there's so many great ones to be made. And I think the other thing that I don't say enough is, and I'd love your take on this. I still think, and hear it's cliche that you're early, but when you look at Twitter, sometimes you might be getting overwhelmed to say, like, oh, there's these people with these massive followings. I'm never going to become them. Well, there's two things there in my mind. One, most of the people with massive followings, a lot of those followings are fake, and you don't want to be them anyways. And then two, there's still so many great connections that you can make now. And as the space evolves, become the good person that has the good following. Because you can do a lot of cool stuff with 10,000 followers, 15,000 followers, 20,000 followers. You don't even shit, man. There's freaking I've talked to people that have hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, have a couple thousand followers. So the follower count doesn't matter. It's reaching out, creating those connections, and making sure you're talking to the right people. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, I think that's 100%. You'll see an account with 50,000 followers get like 600 impressions and 3 likes because they're botted.
Right.
In order to grow, you got to do it the right way and just make great content and be a genuine person and be really active and host spaces or be on spaces and um, just be somebody or be yourself and be somebody that people want to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we go into the next question, there are two burning questions from the audience. One, what are your best Pokemon cards? Do you still have them? They're very concerned about this because you mentioned this at one point.
I had a first generation holographic Charizard,
Oh,
and I traded it. I traded it to the biggest guy on the football team sophomore year in high school, so that he would make me look good. And then I got a
ah.
starting. I got the starting defensive end position because he didn't hit me very hard, so I looked really good. It was worth
That's
it.
hilarious. How much is that Charizard worth right now?
I mean, I've seen some sell for in the thousands.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not sure, but yeah, I
That's
still remember it
fantastic.
fondly.
And
And
then
I just got it from opening one of those packs for like $10 at Walmart or whatever. And I saw that and I was just like hooked on basically collecting these things.
and then 2, uh, serious question from one of my OGs. If I get an NFT, does it come with some free medical advice? Feel free to say no.
I actually never considered making that one of our utilities, but now that you bring it up, maybe I could.
See? Not only do you come on the podcast, we have a great conversation. I'm throwing ideas out for future business ideas. Awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's evolve back into the Rough Riders. What I'm interested in, because I also think this is a critical moment. Um, and my dog, I'm sorry, my dog keeps on going in and out, and he's driving me batshit crazy right now. When do you and West Side say, you have that moment, you're like, you know what, this is it, let's do it? Or did this kind of gradually happen? Because I think it's interesting to hear people that have built things when they had the like spark, or they were like, it's time to jump over the cliff and let's just start doing this. What was that moment for you?
It was more gradual.
Hmm.
After hosting like tens to hundreds of projects on our spaces, and I personally was a holder of maybe 100 or 200 different NFT projects
Hmm.
throughout my Web3 journey. just seeing what projects did well, what worked well, and seeing what the vast majority of them did, which was virtually nothing, or things that would harm their holders, like
Yeah.
diluting their collections, adding new collections,
Right.
and just not delivering on any of their promises, not having any utility, um, just being frustrated with things going south, in a lot of the projects that we were in. And once we learned what projects were capable of, and that we were capable of the same thing, just through partnerships, and through assembling a great team. Like, we have an excellent developer team behind us, who developed the X Picker tool and the Bulls and Apes project. So once we knew we had them on board and the artists, that we could do just exactly what some of the great projects can do as well. So we knew
Right.
that we were capable of building greatness, uh, and that was a gradual thing. And when we first started our space, we never even considered, minting a project.
Yeah.
But it just kind of grew, like a seed, essentially, in our minds that we could actually build something great,
Mhm.
through our experience and through our connections, and not doing any of the things that really frustrated us,
Yeah.
and only focusing on the good, because there is a lot of good, out there in NFT projects.
Yep. And so I love what you said there. Again, another thing that I think people really need to hear is I would attribute, and I like your thoughts here too, a lot of your success to the fact that you built a long time before you even decided to do this. And it's those connections. It was understanding what worked well, what didn't work well. Whereas the reverse happens a lot. And I was just talking to my buddy. I'm gonna have to link you up with this guy. It's kind of a dull subject, which is insurance, but he's got a really interesting idea, and he's just a really good dude. But we were talking about how this dynamic is really changing. Where in, let's say, 2021, 2022, it was the NFT was the company, and we quickly realized NFTs are not a company; it's just a technology, right? But the hardest part, I think, is the marketing, brand building. And if you do it organically like you did with that space, now when you actually launch the project, you have the hardest part done. Because if you don't know what you're doing, now you're wasting money on these shit posters that are just going to get you empty botted followers. There's not really genuine connection there, and you easily, I know founders and guys that have been, 50, 60, 70 grand out the hole because of just getting scammed basically by these marketing guys promising the world, and they get nothing, right? And you avoided all of that because you built methodically and you built the right way. I love that, man.
Uh, yeah, I agree, and we use the community, to market for us in a
Mhm.
grassroots, fashion, as opposed to a top-down fashion with influencers. I
Yeah.
think the total amount that we spent on marketing was $3,000.
Yeah.
Um, it was, like, less than 0.5% of our projected mint raise,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, be because we did it organically. We hopped on spaces, people got to know us personally. We were just constantly in all sorts of different spaces, and we were hosting our own. And we used a technology in our Discord server called the Dripbot, that incentivized folks to tweet about us and to engage on our tweets, and we rewarded them, with NFTs and tokens and things like that. So basically, the money that we would have spent on marketing going to influencers, like the traditional model, is for marketing an NFT project. It was going to the folks that were supporting us, and
Yeah.
I think that that's the way that it should be. And that helped to foster a community that was actually interested in our what we were bringing to the table, and not a bunch of flippers, which tends to be a big problem for projects once they mint, is that folks are only in it to flip, and they do, and they leave, and then you're left with nothing. Um, and that didn't happen in the Rough Riders project.
Yeah.
And so we were really blessed to have a great community that supported us, and then we supported them back.
Do you know Tyler, not Taylor? Blue DSK DAO. Have you heard of that project? Yeah.
Yeah, we know
He's
them well. We hosted them on our spaces.
Yeah, he's become a really good buddy of mine. You guys have very similar vibes. Um, and totally believe in him. And now that you're saying what you're saying, believe in the way that you're building too. I'm interested in this. We can go. So we're at. I just want to be cognizant of time. We actually only was almost been talking for an hour and a half at this point. Believe it or not. Um, so I wanna definitely talk about Rough Riders' current state. To do that, you've already talked about kind of your emphasis on the community. You just talked about bot. You talked about your relationships and how you um, built the community up with the organic spaces and branding and marketing. Love all of that. My ask for you is 2 minutes or less. Condense all that into what is Rough Riders. If I'm not privy to the information that we just got here, I'm finding you for the first time. What are you doing?
Now, or what is Rough Riders?
2 minutes or less. What is Rough Riders?
Okay. Oh,
What are you trying to project with your company, Rough Riders? What do you want to say?
we're a Western 3D PFP art collection on Ethereum. We start by rewarding our holders in 4 different ways, and then we layer utility on top of that, using TradeFi utilities, growing your Twitter account, poker, um, and gaming and metaverse utilities as well. And We minted with an ETH back guarantee. So if you minted our NFT and you didn't like it, you could return it and get your ETH back, no questions asked, using the blockchain. It's built into the smart contract, so it makes our
Mm,
collection unruggable. Um, and we were pre-funded, so all this utility was live on mint day. And what we've done recently is we partnered with the Genuine Undead community to offer Gold Rush, both to our holders and to Genuine Undead holders, which was a fun, free raffle system on our website, which was off chain and gas free, where we introduced 3 new one of ones in 2D style and kind of a different style to our collection, as well as a bunch of other prizes. And that was an extra utility on top for Genuine Undead holders as well. And Genuine Undead NFTs also now earn silver dollars in our Discord server. So we've been blessed to have great partners, including the ones that we minted with, and now Genuine Undead has been super supportive as well.
nice. That's awesome. Who and through this journey of now that you have launched the NFT, I'm interested. So when did your NFT launch?
January 31st, and we minted out in 84 minutes in the worst bear market the NFT world has ever seen.
Because you built the damn thing right. And that is what people need to hear, man. Like it's really not rocket science here, people. Build it right in a genuine way, and you can do what the doc has done. You're not going to save lives with mascara and dead butt or whatever he said, but you can do something effective in Web3 if you build it the right way. I'm interested in this. And if the answer is I don't know or I don't have it, is totally fine. Since you've minted, so we're talking about a half a year now, right? Any like surprises or things when you launch, you're like, oh, I think Rough Riders is definitely going to go this way. But now 6 months in, you're like, man, like this is really interesting to me that it took this left turn or this right turn or this is successful. This wasn't successful.
I think it went really similar to what we expected.
Hmm.
Our vision was to do everything that we possibly could to reward our holders in every way.
Yeah.
without extracting liquidity from them.
Yeah.
Um, and and that's what we've done. Just continued to reward them and layer on utility through partnerships, to have our hands in virtually every aspect of Web3, whether
Yeah.
it's metaverse or poker or tokens or alpha calls or pretty much anything you name it, and maximizing the digital membership aspect of an
Yeah.
NFT collection. That was our vision,
Mhm.
and that's what we've executed. And now to kind of cap it off for our 6-month anniversary, we have an IRL meetup in Newport Beach. So you're invited to that as well on August
Whoa,
3rd.
bro! I'm, like, not far from Newport Beach, man,
I know you should
and
drive
you
up
just gave me
and
a
meet us.
live
And
invitation? If I am free, we are
um,
hugging it out, brother. Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. I can't wait. And our what we want to do is maximize community because that's why we love
Right.
NFTs, me and Westside of BB and the rest of our team.
Yeah.
And there's nothing better than an IRL meetup.
Yeah.
And so we're really blessed to be able to do that. And it's going to be in a great place at a great time. Newport Beach in August. It's hard to beat that.
That's awesome, man. One thing as you talk, and this is what I see. This is the one downfall I do see. Llamaverse was a product of this, and um, I would love your thoughts on this. But your brand, the Rough Riders, at some point you have added an outside token or a utility or partnered with yet another person. Do you ever think or get concerned about at some point I'm diluting my own brand? What are your thoughts there?
We did have that concern at first. The first month, I think I had a new announcement every day with a new utility or a new partnership.
Mhm.
And we realized that that was probably too much and that we were overwhelming folks a little bit. So we backed off and we focused on our core values.
Right.
But we still, we have basically some of the most utility I've seen in any NFT
Yeah.
project, and that's our vision, and we're going to stick to it, even though a lot of folks aren't used to that because other projects hadn't done that.
Right. And so, but what I like about your answer is it's thoughtful that the fact you've thought about it, right? I think I've seen many cases of this. It's their it's their only thought in utility. They're like, "Oh, we're just gonna be really good with partnerships." And so they just keep on throwing partnerships and partnerships, and at some point it dilutes their brand, like I said, but two, they just become meaningless, right? Like, who in their right mind that actually has a normal life can literally go through all these partnerships and take advantage of everything, right? Do you think about that too on, um not the dilution part, but, I struggle with it too, right? Because most projects that come on, um, get an NFT, I'm part of their community, and I'm like, "Listen, man, I might have hundreds of NFTs at this point. I don't have time to go in these Discords. Like, how am I taking advantage of these benefits?" Do you think about that for your community, or do you feel like you provide tools that it's easy to figure out what they're getting?
I think what I wanted to do was have something for everybody. And so if you're not interested in playing in Nifty Island, like that's not our
Mhm.
sole focus.
Right,
If you're not interested in poker, that's not our sole focus.
right.
If you're not interested in some of the other things that we do,
Yeah,
we have something else to offer for you. And I think what an NFT project is at its core is a home base for you, for to foster community and get to know people around you while having utility and a reason to stay. Um, while what we want to do, so the meta over the past year or so has been meme tokens and other
yeah,
things, and what we want to do is offer ways for you to maximize that if that's what you choose to take part in. So like you have Rough Riders as your home base, and then
yeah,
we have alpha colors that help you on that journey.
yeah,
um, and we host those projects in our spaces so that you can get
yeah.
to learn more about them, because what we want to do is collaborate with those projects and with those communities,
Yeah.
without competing against them,
Mhm.
and just maximizing the interests that our holders may have.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. But yeah, I think you also answered this a little bit before too, is you have these pillars, right? Which are Twitter, poker, metaverse. And so you're at least keeping that focused around the partnerships on those pillars. I think that's critical that you at least have to have some type of focus and it's just not scattership of partnerships. So I think your answers were good and I think they're good in the reason that you've thought about this stuff, right? And I think it's critical to continue to evolve that thought and what does the future look like. We're going to get there in a second, and we'll start winding down here because we just hit an hour and a half. It's been a, by the way, first time like podcast video. You're crushing it, man. You're killing it.
Thanks,
So you're
man.
doing a great job. Um,
You too. You're doing an awesome job.
thanks, man. I've done this a time or two, and like I said, I love it. I love it. I'm gonna link you up with JR from the district. His is really community focused. He's got an interesting twist though. Like each district is represents the Web3 community as a whole. So, like a district for artists, a district for founders, a district for devs, a district even for the shit meme coin people, right? Because that is a part of Web3, and he's trying to not deny that this stuff exists. And then each district is a representation of the Web3 community as a whole, and then building solely around community. But he would be a great person to bring on your NFT show. So I just had to think about
That
that.
sounds great.
I wanted to get that out before I forgot about it. So remind me to link you up with him. Um,
Sure.
let's do this. I always ask one more question at the end. Softball question. Don't let the knees shiver. It'll be okay. I promise you this. But before we get there, and then I'll say my closing comments, and we'll call it a beautiful night. By the way, consistent viewership the entire time. People are loving every second of it. They're loving you. West has already said he's ready to come on the podcast. He's a little bit jealous that you're on here, and he's not.
Oh man, I haven't even
Uh,
looked at the comments.
so I have to bring him back on. Maybe we'll get him on the show as well. Cause even though you're both founders, it would be fun to have his story as well, too. Cause I'm just fascinated by human stories. You know where I think a lot of this fascination from me, and I just thought about this. I loved This American Life. Like that's just that like raw storytelling, and I think people telling their stories is just fascinating to me because even though we talk about the same stuff, like we've talked about tonight, right? Grit, determination, understanding, qualities of an entrepreneur. Like these themes are not different, but your experience as a doctor and what you bring to the table and how you interpreted them and then applied them through your Web3 journey, that is totally different than what JR said a week ago, or Mr. Zero said on Friday on my space, even though the themes are very similar. So I just love that. I think it's fascinating. So, but before I ask my last question, I always ask this, love to hear next 6 to 12 months. You talked a lot about all the cool things that you're doing. You got your 4 pillars. You've built partnerships with really notable communities. What are you excited about in the future? Again, don't share things that you don't want to share. The number one flaw that a founder has made on this show is giving too much information. So I don't want you to do that. But give me at least a little something that people can get excited for.
Yeah, I can tell you the area of our project that we're focusing on, and that's content. And I think content is king, and it allows something for everybody to build around, and that's what drives growth. So we're focusing on our content, and our art, and that's the next avenue of the project that we're going to maximize.
I think it's awesome, and I think we have a lot of synergies when it comes to content, so I'm excited about that. I cannot wait to see what you all do. Dude, been a fascinating conversation. I still have my closing comments, but before that, one question, ask the same question to all the guests. You have your own space series. You've seen what spaces are around the Web3 space. I'm sure you've listened to podcasts, raw, unfiltered feedback about your time on the midlife Mikey G experience tonight. Hit me with it.
Oh man, I definitely didn't expect to go so deep into burnout and my background, and it's something I've never heard before. Basically everything that you got out of me, I never expected to have brought out of me on a space about Rough Riders or myself and Web3. So props to you
Thanks,
for that.
man.
I loved it. It was awesome, and it kind of inspired me to when I host my spaces. I definitely want to learn more about the person behind the project too. So
Yeah.
and I think it's more engaging and more interesting than just JPEG.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, man. Me, it literally warms my heart. Random note: I had a CT scan. Never had that before. You know what those are, but they put the dye in my got a little kidney situation thing going on. We won't get too deep into that, but they put the dye in my blood, right? And then it makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside. It also feels like you have to pee yourself. Um, I didn't feel like I had my pee myself when you said that, but it did make me feel warm and fuzzy inside, like the dye running through my through my veins, my man. So thank you for that,
Did you
because
have a
that's
metallic taste in your
yeah,
tongue too?
I didn't get that. They said that, but I didn't get that. I just got the really warm sensation, and then it gets real warm down under, and it makes you feel like you've just pissed yourself. Let's be honest, that's the feeling. I don't know how else to describe it. So if you haven't had a CT
Mhm.
scan and you need to get one, just wait for that dye to hit your blood veins. Crazy things happen. But yeah, man, it's awesome because that's exactly what I'm trying to convey. The fact that you felt that means the world to me. So thank you so much. I'll say my closing comments, and then when I hang up, just a couple minutes after we go offline, hang on and don't hang up, so we can just chat real quick, and I can tell you just a couple more things what to expect with the content and stuff. Um, but here are my closing comments. One, thank you for being you, because I cannot do what you do. You save lives, you see some crazy stuff, and I have just always admired people like you. And it's interesting to me. I really loved your take on saying that when you first started, you were like, this is definitely not for me. What the hell am I doing here? And it was just really cool to hear your story, how you evolved over time. I can tell you're a genuine dude. I cannot wait to hang out in Phoenix, hopefully Huntington Beach. Unfortunately, I have a ton of family visiting in August. Do you know the date yet?
August 3rd.
So you're saying there's a chance. I think I just dumb and dumbered it. Yeah, I think there's a chance there. That's exciting. So yes, I like meeting you in real life would be amazing because I can tell you're a really good guy. I commend you for building it the right way. Like, props to you, dude, because there has been so many people that have even come on this show that have had really good, like, business savvy people, been entrepreneurs, had really good ideas, but they still got caught up in the minutia of thinking that they needed to build a certain way when at the end of the day, you said it right. And it's what I do, it's what you do on your space. It's just connection, man. And I think keep on being you, because I'm convinced our brands in the future are what people are going to want. I really do see, and I don't know if you see this too, but there is this like growing need for just genuine human connection. Like the social media, just the narrative, around the world, not just Web3, right? People are people, man. We all bleed red blood, and we just want to be heard, and we want to felt like we're connected to. So keep on doing what you're doing. I felt all the good, warm vibes. I say this a lot, dude. Did I or did I not lie to you? Virtual Campfire, we just became friends online. You're a brother to me now. I cannot wait to grow, learn, and help each other out, man, because we have similar vibes, and I think we can do a lot of really cool in this space. Actually, Tyler from DSK, we dubbed this live on the podcast. Unfortunately, a majority of the time, the reality is nice guys finish last, but I am convinced you're one of the nice guys, and Tyler and JR and all my OGs and your OG family, and we get enough nice guys together, damn straight we're finishing first, brother. I am firmly convinced of this. So let's finish first, man. Let's finish first and keep on growing the relationship. And thank you, finally, for your time. You're a doctor, you own a company. The number one valuable thing you have is time, and you just gave me an hour and 40 minutes of it. So that means the world to me. Thank you so much, man.
Oh man, thanks for the kind words. Being on this was an incredible experience, and now I'll have the confidence going forward to be on more live streams and video content. So thank you for that.
Absolutely,
But I mean,
man.
it was incredible. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
It was
man.
really an amazing experience.
Appreciate it. And with that being said, all of you beautiful people watching, Midlife Crisis Podcast is going to be coming back next week. Couldn't tell you who the guest is. I actually finally hired somebody to help me out with logistics because I just can't do it all. It's too much for me to handle. But an amazing conversation. I knew Doc was going to be the man. He absolutely is the man. We had a great night. We freaking love you all. Mikey G, Doc, and the Midlife Crisis Podcast is out.